Hello, everybody, and welcome to Storytelling, where we explore the stories, myth, and magic of the starry skies. Right, we always do these poetic things together, and it's always a challenge for me. I get my tongue twisted. I'll get better.
You wrote this one, though.
I did. I'm here with our sacred astronomer and astrologer, Gemini Brett. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Poole Walsh, and I'm the founder of Astrology Hub. And today we are covering a small little topic. Where do we come from? And we're going to be looking to the night sky, to the mythology, to actually give us some clues for that. So, very excited to dive in. Before we do that, though, Brett, do you want to start with a recap of our soul work?
Yeah, absolutely.
So our scavenger hunt that we were doing the last few weeks, we had the first last week we were to look at um, the horizon at sunrise and to greet the planets that we met there. And then we've been in this Mercury retrograde story as well.
Sorry,
Are
I'm
you
muted.
muted?
I'm muted because I'm like tearing up some really old tea. I'm going to tell a very old story today. So
Okay,
I bring
nice.
it back as deep as I could go.
All
Yeah,
right, as
absolutely.
you
So just being with the rising sun. And there's a thing I didn't say. You could see I hesitated last time, but like to reclaim a mythic experience of the rising sun.
mm.
Or even we could say maybe like a mythological experience, like to see that more than just like the spinning earth, right? I think it's a really powerful and important thing for the star student to do.
In I've been a student of Hawaiian hula for 10 years. One of the chants that has been passed down through the lineage that I'm a part of, actually we call up the sun in the chant, but it's both the physical sun. I mean, they didn't actually think they had to go out and chant for the sun to rise, but it was an honoring of the sun. And then also it was calling up the sun or the light within us. So it's like a simultaneous process of calling up the light outside, but also the light inside. So I love what you're saying, and I think there's a lot of merit to doing that. It's like a daily reminder that we can have to call forth our own light.
It's such a powerful, daily ritual. I experienced that the first time on Haleakala in the House of the Sun in Maui, and just heard, as the sun was almost about to rise, people in this amazingly powerful, magical chant. And I was just like, what's going on? And there were a lot of people together chanting to the sun. And then, you could tell better than I do, but the practice is you chant until it's come all the way up.
Yes.
And so it takes a bit, and so and it was so cool to be an outsider. And I wasn't too close to them. I was just like, wow, what's going on? And I could feel and experience what they were doing. And then it was just like, wow, what an incredible way to honor the sun, because I was up there to do that, right? But with no tradition and no guidance, just as a mystic while I'm watching a sunrise and watching my shadow. And yeah, so I have since gone up with folks who are chanting and taught me to sing a bit. And it's a wonderful thing to do. And I think just that idea, whatever language you speak, whatever song it is that is here to sing itself through your voice, like sing to the sun as he rises in the morning, and really experiencing that's, tells us so much about the power of the ascendant, like where things move from invisibility to visibility, or from below to above. And so last time we were spending a lot of time speaking about this very significant difference of night and day, and how it's a fun kind of at least proof for the truth that astronomical cycles influence our energetic experience as earthlings. It's the one that I like to start with if I'm ever in like debate with a rationalist who's open-hearted and open-minded enough to talk about why I study this strange thing called astrology. But today I can't help it. My hair is just getting more and more mad scientist. So I think I'm going to go way far off the astronomy books and into some of the myths that speak of the night sky, and maybe answer a question that the astronomers of our day cannot.
Hmm. That's exciting. Okay, before we go there, I wanted to share a letter that Liv from Norway sent in. Liv, thank you so much for reaching out to us. She says, "Thank you, Amanda and Brett, for storytelling. It has been such a blessing. My offering to Mercury." So we had the scavenger hunt to give an offering to Mercury while we're in retrograde, and then to ask for something from Mercury. Okay. So she says, "My offering to Mercury is to not watch the news on TV in the morning and instead sit with my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. I have been through the I should know this and the shame thing, real light bulb moments. It's amazing to feel the different energies as the planets rise above the horizon. I'm looking forward to March and my solar return ceremony. It's in the middle of the day, so I will be out listening to nature and spirit. I have an astrology education, very theoretical and psychological. It has been missing something, and I think storytelling has sent me in the right direction, out under the sun, moon, and stars."
Love it.
Doesn't that just, it gives me chills. It makes my heart so happy to think that Liv is taking this, her study of astrology, and now with your encouragement is going outside and having her experience of the sky. It's just a beautiful thing.
Her story reminds me of a dear friend of mine and a teacher of mine who, when she got this like giant crystal, this amazing piece of selenite, and she's like, "Why are people watching TV?" She's like, "Watch this, man." So funny, right? But you know, another thing about that same teacher is like she had told at one point told me, and you know, like just kind of looking into my heart and seeing some of the like suffering around like confidence, and she encouraged me. It's a really great thing that I've shared with many since. When somebody says something nice about you, like repeat it to yourself twice, or maybe even keep a list for a while. And I'm now like in my role right now. I mean, I hear so much really positive feedback from people. It's so lovely, you know. And I love. I mean, Anna could tell you that sometimes at the end of a day of like readings, I'm just like so charged up because I see these people becoming themselves, and we exchange such like sweet things, you know. But nothing really does it for me than hearing people say, "Wow, all I had to do was to be reminded to look up and to like go outside." And like that matters so much. And it's this torch, you know, that like it was handed to me, and that there's nothing more important for me to pass along, which is this opportunity to say, yeah, we've learned all these roots and all these rules and these equations and this psychology and this beautiful thing called astrology. And what if we start seeing the chart there in nature? And yeah, and the sun tells more accurate news than the TV does. That's for damn sure. So here's to you, Liv. Like we should all follow that advice, right?
Yes, absolutely. All right. So one more announcement before we go into our storytelling about where we came from. The wait list for Brett's upcoming Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers class that we're going to be doing together, well, Astrology Hub will be hosting for Brett, is now open. So the wait list is open. We will be opening registration up in March, but you can get your name on the wait list now. And you can do that by going to astrologyhub.com/sacred astronomy, astrologyhub.com/sacred astronomy. And we'll be sending some information out to you, things that you can do to prepare for the course. So it'd be great for you to get on that list, and we'll know that you're interested, and we'll know that we can send some more information your way.
I'm so excited about it. I teach certification courses for OPA and will for Kepler College coming up, and it's great. But Astrology Hub is going to give me the opportunity to kind of expand the teachings by really teaching it my way, like to really do it kind of more in that shamanic, like embodied, out building stuff, out being with the sky, and take a little bit more time in that than the academic. And I'm so excited about it. I'll say also, like our last podcast about, how do we communicate with the haters? Should we even try to? And it was really wonderful to hear many people's feedbacks in the comments, whether it was on Facebook or on YouTube. I try to look at all of them, and it was really cool to hear some of your personal stories. It's really nice to hear some of you writing in, like Liv just did. Amanda shared some really wonderful things with me, and I really encourage you to to like share with us and ask questions and tell us the truth, you know. So here's a good question for everyone: where do we come from? And I want that to be, in a way, the subject of today, the week, the lifetime. It's the question that I'm always asking. And we, a couple episodes back, maybe a few now, got to play with circles and crescents and crosses and explore this question through kind of the sacred geometry, sister science, and investigation of the glyphs that we use to draw the planets, you know, the way that we do today. And so the circle of spirit, I think, is this intriguing thing. I've chosen this cup. My friend made all these planet cups for me. So, but this one is the spiral, the galactic center, or like the womb, the center of it all. I was in Chaco Canyon a few years ago. It's a really beautiful sacred site in New Mexico. It's hard to get to. It was a summer solstice. And I was just talking with Anna about this. I had the craziest mystical experience there that I'm not going to share today. It had to do with a magical raven. But anyway, I was really tuned into a glyph that you see often in the petroglyphs, which is a spiral. And fortunately, the night that I was there, the astronomers also did this like slideshow at the kind of little observatory that's there. Because this is an ancient astronomer's site. Temples that are aligned to the winter solstice sunrise, things like that, you know. And it was amazing in this presentation that they gave. They're like, yeah, we don't really know what the spiral's about. It seems like they're talking about everything comes from the source. So like these really beautiful things. And then they showed an image of like a time lapse, or what's called a star trails photograph image of the North Star and all the stars that form concentric circles around it. You know, everybody's seen that, I hope. I think you'll see that actually if you go to the waitlist. I think that's the image that Anna used for the waitlist, is that kind of time-lapse image of the sky around a pole and all these concentric circles. And it's like, look, if you don't have like star trails, time-lapse photography, like that experience of that sky, it looks like this. It looks like a spiral. You know what I mean? And it was like one slide after the next. And I was like, do you not see that? Like, that's what it is, right? And it's so much more. And it's this image too, like of galactic center, or of like the black hole, of this idea of the vortex that takes you into nowhere. And this whole image of like the void, right? From which we come, or the womb from which we come. I think is a lovely thing. It's amazing as we study these different mythos. They usually begin with, in the beginning was the light, or in the beginning was the darkness, right? but then, even if it's in the beginning was the darkness, the chaos, the void, then comes the light. So either way, we can say we come from the light. And I think one experience that I have often now with the sun is around this old story around the Son of God that was born of a virgin. Do you know that story, Amanda?
The Son of God that was born from a virgin?
Yeah, have you heard that one?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that.
Yeah, Horus, right?
Yeah, Horus.
So I want to tune back into that, or Haru, in what I understand would be a more appropriate like version of the language that was actually spoken in a land called Kemet back in the day, the land that we now call Egypt. And we'll speak a bit about Osiris and Isis, who are actually like Greek names for these Neters and Neteru, like principles from Kemet or from Egypt, where in Egypt, or in that land, they were known as Asur and Aset. And Horus, the avenger, who is Haru. And that is, Horus is the rising sun, who defeats his uncle Set. So let's tune into that. It's a really wonderful time to explore some of these energies in the sky now. And so I've been asking this question of like, okay, well, I'm told by astronomers that the Earth and all the planets of our solar system were actually born of the sun, right? Which is this kind of cool thing, because we were looking at that circumpunct symbol, right? Like the sun symbol of of the circle and the dot, and how that there's this emergence, you know? I mean, even if you take it all the way back to like the modern miracle, or the modern priest class miracle, right? Which is the Big Bang. which is a trippy thing. Like you're told that like, okay, everything came out of nothing suddenly in an instant that like broke all the rules, and like the physics doesn't work then. Like just give us one miracle and then we're good from there. You know, like we just need one, like every religion needs just one miracle, right? And that's the miracle of like the modern science religion, right? It's like, and it's a very yeah, pardon me, but masculine expression of creation. Everything just ejaculated out of nothing, basically, is that image to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, wait, if everything came out of nothing, then certainly nothing must be everything. Like, how does that work? Where
Right.
did it come from before?
Right.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And it's cool. It's kind of like explosions, like all the way down, like Russian dolls in this like modern kind of astronomical image of cosmological creation, right? That so in solar system, it's a smaller explosion. It's Monique, who's been leading the inner circle this month, has been talking about kind of like maybe we're moving through a more activated place of space, and that's like what's assisting in the evolution of consciousness, which seems apparent and absolutely not apparent at our time at the same time, right? That, maybe space isn't all just uniform and vacuum, and that there's photon belts or like, gaseous places we can cruise through. And that's akin to kind of like the cosmology of like how stars are born, that there's just this pressure that these gases that are like left over from previous suns that have lived their lives and got bigger and bigger and exploded and supernovae, and there's just stuff around, and the stuff kind of comes together and it gets hot and pressurized, and then there's these explosions, and suddenly a star. But early version of the star with all this stuff, and that as it accretes and kind of comes together, it becomes a star, sometimes two stars, and the many planets and their planets' moons and the things. I mean, I'm not going to teach astronomy 101 here, and I'm not the cat to do it anyway. Like the astronomy that I teach is more our feet on the ground, observing the sacred sky and learning how to connect the sky and the chart. That's why I call it sacred astronomy, right? But it's cool to tune into the cosmology of our day. And so the general idea is that nebula, right? And I mean, a wonderful thing to do is just to go to the gazillion Hubble telescope free pictures and just look at all the nebula. Like they are magical and have these fun names and these amazing shapes. It really is like the shapes in the clouds. And I love how like the astronomers are celebrating that, like the hourglass and the cat's eye and all these things. And so it's generally known that nebulae, right, or these really hot active birth centers like mangers, right, for stars to be born. And yet nobody knows where our star was born. So, we're all kind of hit with this like primordial soup lightning strike that led to the salamander, who is now you, like Darwinian evolution scene. Okay. But that happened on Earth, and Earth is a result of the sun, and the sun is the result of something else, but where was that nebula that our sun was born? It's fun. Just as you were sharing earlier, it was 3:42 here. It's now 10 minutes later. And I want to talk about Messier object number 42 and 3, the Trinity. And 42, interestingly, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, is said to be like the answer to all questions of the life, universe, and everything. Traditional Hitchhiker's Guide people are going to ridicule me for paraphrasing that, but I do my best. Okay. But I love that that number 42 is aligned to this thing, because Messier object number 42, while like any astronomer of the modern age worth their salt would probably like smack me for saying this, I believe that is where our sun was born, because the myths of many lands seem to tell this truth. And go ahead, Amanda.
What's it called again?
Well, the Orion Nebula.
Okay. What were you calling it?
So Messier was an astronomer. And so a lot of these like apparent naked eye things that we can observe, and I'll just cut to the chase. Your scavenger hunt for the week ahead will be to engage physically with the Orion Nebula and some stars around. I'm going to show you some pictures of them. So if you're listening to the podcast version of this, yeah, just look up the Orion Nebula and find out where it is. It's basically in Orion's sword. And I have a feeling, though this certainly would not be suggested by the types of stars that are born there now compared to our star, by how far it is away, which is more than 1,300 light years, and some other things that it could possibly be where our sun was born. But the very things that would absolutely rule out the potential that our star was born in the Orion Nebula are based upon a bunch of theories, which are assumptions. So a lot of times we're like proving things mathematically, but we don't necessarily state the assumptions, including like, the constants that we're using that oftentimes are invented to let the math work, right? So this is one of the issues with science. I mean, I don't have a problem with science in general, the advancement of the mind and what we know. I think it's great. But sometimes, like, because of our assumptions, which are completely based upon the cosmology of the current time, we are going to just reject things that don't agree with it, right? So we're looking to prove what, these things, but we're just proving what we want to prove, right? I mean, which is a challenge certainly for astrologers too, like all the time. So, all right, well, let me show some pretty pictures and I'll tell an old story of a virgin birth and how the sun was born. And we'll tune into the stories from a couple other cultures too, which seem to support this strange thing. This is an image from a talk that I did last year, and maybe I'll show you guys where you can see it in full later on, but it's basically at my website. But, one thing, like what we heard Liv saying, just like, wow, I'm going to the sun, I'm with the sunrise. If she's doing this again and again, if any of you are doing this again and again at the time in which we're recording this, like soon you will see Mercury born as a morning star out of nowhere. You will see Jupiter, like all of a sudden they're in the evening sky. And just as when we first started this journey together, Amanda, some weeks ago, Jupiter was kind of going away in the evening sky as Mercury was becoming visible there. Now in the morning sky, Venus is disappearing, and we won't see Venus for like 2 to 3 months, as it is every 19 months. It's a sad time. And another time, I think we can tell the story of the descent of Inanna and how that's linked to this Venus cycle. But just as Venus disappears, now Jupiter appears there and Mercury for a short amount of time, right? And so as you're watching these horizons, as you're making sunrise a practice or sunset a practice, or hopefully both, this new version of astrology happens. It's not just, oh, well, that's Jupiter in Aquarius, just where he was last week. No, he was in Aquarius as an evening star, and then he disappeared, and now he's in Aquarius as a morning star. It's a different being. It's as different as watching the rising sun or waking up before the rising sun or watching the night after the sun sets in the west, And the planets just teach you about that. Your energy, your experience, the things that you hear when you go out and connect will teach you about that. And Amanda, like I know you live in a sunset place, right?
Yes, definitely.
So watching the sunrise is tricky for you. Like you actually would have to really make a mission or maybe go spend the night somewhere, right? That's how it is for us too. We have a great view of the west, but for the morning, I have to kind of make a journey or get up and drive or maybe spend the night at my sister's house who does the east, but not the west. It's very rare to have both horizons or even one. I'm very blessed to do so. So, and speaking of, this was a photo from our house, I guess last May, and it's when Venus and Mercury were together here. And I wanted to circle this star Elnath because it's a really cool star to get to know. It's ELNATH, and it's the northern horn of the bull. And it's usually the marker star that astronomers use for galactic anticenter. So literally, like if you're looking at that star, you are in a place on Earth where your back is to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is said to be the sun of our sun, right? And it's in a really powerful place right now. This is a long story, but the signs and the constellations are not the same. The tropical signs shift through the constellations over a great cycle called precession. But right now, in our day and age, this sacred place of the sky, which is where the ecliptic, or the plane of our solar system, the path of the sun, and the Milky Way, our galaxy, intersect. There's two of those places, and one of them is the galactic center, and one is galactic edge or galactic anti-center. In our day and age, that place hosts the solstice points. And it's a kind of long story of why that's a big deal. That's a big deal. I think more than anything will speak to the shift in the evolution and the growth of consciousness that I agree is very much happening right now. So this kind of place is where the river of stars, or the Milky Way, intersects the solar system plane. You know, the solar system's like our neighborhood, and the Milky Way, the galaxy, is like, you know, like the city or something. So it's a big deal where those kind of, you know, it's like we're like I don't know, like the interstate freeways coming into like your local big road. You see what I'm saying? And so it's a really powerful place of the heavens, and it's a place in the midst of a group of stars that modern astronomers call the winter hexagon. And it's very visible in the night sky now as we're recording this in mid-February in 2021, just based on where the sun is in relationship to this place. It's very evident at sunset and for hours into the night. And so Orion is a very well-known constellation who is part of this winter hexagon. Which itself connects very bright stars that are called Capella, Castor and Pollux, the stars of the twins, Procyon, the small dog, Sirius, the big dog, Ursa Major, and the brightest star of our sky, Regal, who is the foot of Orion, and then Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. And they form this amazing like hexagon in the heavens. Which the Dakota Nakota people know as the sacred hoop. So there's a really wonderful book called Lakota Star Knowledge by Ronald Goodman, which I really recommend. It's kind of a survey of like many Lakota elders at the Rosebud Reservation. And they speak of, in the Star Mysteries, they speak of this place, the sacred hoop, is where our souls come from. And then they say in this book, he basically transmits it this way, like, then we will go to a place that sets in the southwest, which I'm sure is galactic center. And it's the opposite side. Importantly, they, instead of using Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, for the sacred hoop, they used the Pleiades. And then here's an image, if you're watching a video version of this, in the great Stellarium software, where you can actually tune into other cultures' star knowledge and constellations and show pictures of that. And so we're looking at kind of a super constellation that the Lakota call the sacred hoop or the racetrack, many names. And they use the Pleiades, right, which is very important to these people, as it is to the people of Hawaii and the people of the Southwest and all over the world. There's this really deep, soulful connection to the Pleiades, this, you know, magical cluster of stars in the sky. Do you want to say anything about the Pleiades in Hawaii, Amanda?
Well, from everything that I've heard from different kahuna that I've studied with, different books that I've read, the Hawaiians believed that they came from the Pleiades, that they're literal descendants of the Pleiades. So it's definitely a very sacred place. They have the whole Makahiki festival, which is the yearly festival tied to the rising of the Pleiades in the East. And I mean, it's definitely a core part. And I've never had the opportunity to ask why specifically, like where is the mythology or the storyline and why? I would love to be able to ask that at some point.
Yeah, and I would say ask the stars. They might too. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's interesting, but some say like the Hopi say this, or the Lakota say this, that there's a lot of different traditions that are very connected to that place of the heavens. And it is a part of this sacred hoop where we are said that our souls come from. And then also this racetrack of stars, or this giant kind of asterism or super constellation of stars from different constellations that's known as the winter hexagon for the Lakotas. It was this racetrack, which is a long story that I've told actually in one of the Astrology Hub ceremonies earlier this year. And also it's known to be the Inipi, or the sweat lodge in the sky, where we will be purified when we die, before we walk the spirit road, which is the Milky Way, to somewhere that sets in the southwest, which I'm sure is the galactic center.
Yeah. Well, what I'm also finding interesting is I've also heard that there's certain people who came from Sirius, and so seeing that they're connected here in the mythology, they're not isolated stars. They're actually, there's a connection between them. Is just interesting.
It is totally. And you know, an amazing thing is that like constellations are very earthly. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Like stars are celestial, but the way that we assemble them into pictures is very much based on Earth's view of those stars, which are often like, you know, so far apart, like thousands of light years apart from one another. But here they look next to each other. And one just happens to be much further away, but so much bigger that it's like the same size and shape as one that's much closer, but much smaller, that kind of thing. So I think it's really cool to know that like the constellations themselves are actually an earthly experience. They're not going to be that different than Mars or Jupiter or whatever. But if you get out to Sirius, right, you're not going to see this picture. Obviously, you would be standing on one of the stars that's included here. You know, what do the Pleiades look like from there? What does our star Sol look like from there? And, you know, I always find that to be a wonderful, well, trip. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right. So this is where our souls come from. Now, there's some whispers from the mystery traditions that seem to agree that this is the place of the heavens known as the Silver Gate, or the Silver Key of St. Pete, and that it's where we come from, and that we'll be going to the Golden Gate. Not that bridge that's over there from where I sit, but it's probably named for this. That the mystery tradition says that there is a kind of a golden gate of our forward direction where we will go when we die, or the Golden Key, interestingly. So I recorded this time that was actually the exact opposite time of year from the Makaliki festival, right? Which is the Hawaiian New Year's, tuned first and foremost to a moon phase, but a moon phase that's around the time when the sun is opposite the Pleiades, which happens in November. The opposite side of the year, the sun visits the Pleiades. So we were talking with Mercury a couple of weeks ago about when the sun's there with Maya, Mercury's mother, right? That's like this idea of the Pleiades going into the cave, right? So much of what I've talked about here in the storytelling thing is connecting to the truth that like the great light of the sun is where we go blind to the beings who get too close or go under the beams, right? And so that happens, like the sun kind of goes and eats the stars, and then they kind of pop out the other side and are reborn in the morning. And so I gave this talk also around the dog days of summer, which is a term we still use, but I understand it's rooted in this idea that Sirius, the dog star, as the sun gets close every year, will kind of disappear as an evening star and then reappear later as a morning star. And that in Egypt, that would be about a 70-day disappearance. And this is why it's said that the mummification process was a 70-day process. So the story I want to tell is about one of these. I'm wondering, sake of time, I want to find a short version. And I might cut to the second death, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just tell the first short version of the first. So, you know, importantly, it said that we are born once of our mother, and we can be born again and again of spirit, but you can only be born once of yourself, and that is the ultimate rebirth, right? And perhaps some of that story is linked here, but this is a story of Osiris and Isis, who was his sister, his consort, his queen, the queen of heaven. And they were two of a set of four. The brother was Set and sister Nephthys. And everyone loved Osiris and Isis. They brought us agriculture. They brought us civilization. They taught us so much of what it was to be human and awaken in consciousness and spirit. Everyone loved them, maybe except for Set. And Nephthys, it said, loved Osiris so much that one night she took Isis's form and became pregnant with his child, who would be born as the jackal-headed Anubis. But Set was very jealous of Osiris, for he wanted Isis to be his. And Isis, told her husband Osiris, her king, to not invite their evil brother Set to a birthday party that Osiris is having, a solar return party, right? But he's like, come on, he's our brother. And so Set showed up, and he said he showed up with 72 of his peeps and brought the most amazing sarcophagus. And he said that whoever fit into the sarcophagus perfectly would be able to keep it to be buried. And it said that these folks were really into beautiful burials. And so everybody gave it a try, and nobody fit. And finally, the birthday boy was asked to have a go. And of course, it fit Osiris perfectly because it had been cut to his dimensions, because this was a great trick. As soon as Osiris was inside, Set's 72 henchmen slammed the lid and put chains around it and locked Osiris there and threw him in the Nile, where he drowned and came back to life later. The sarcophagus is said to have floated down the Nile and found its way to an island off of Byblos. And a tree magically sprouted through the sarcophagus on this island, in which the island itself was growing, and this magical tree just sprouted instantly to gigantic wonder. And the king of Byblos heard about this, and he knew that tree should be in his palace. And so it was cut down and it was brought there. And later someone else came, and this was Isis, who was in disguise. I mean, in some ways it said that she was disguised in her pain, for this is not her way, but there was a hole where her love once was. And she took the form of a human being and became nursemaid to the young prince of this queen of Byblos. And some have suggested that, needing to fill this hole where her love once was, she really took a liking to this young human being, this prince, and that she decided to give him the ultimate gift, which is immortality. And very importantly, people don't try this at home, because apparently, according to the story, the way you do this is you hold the baby above open flames. And so this had to happen night after night after night. It said that Isis, there in this palace with this pillar that she could feel her husband was trapped inside, would take the form of the bird, of the falcon, and fly around this pillar, and then come and perform this sacred ritual with this child and bring him and bathe him in the flames. And then on the last night that was required for the last pieces of mortality to be born after this child, so we could receive this greatest gift of immortality, his mother walks in and was like, what are you doing, like, with my baby and the fire, right? And so Isis puts the baby down and then reveals her true form. The queen falls instantly to her knees. Isis, my queen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was you. What can I do? And it was something like, yeah, well, my husband's in that pillar and I'll be taking it home now. And so it was. And Isis retrieved Osiris's dead body from the sarcophagus within this pillar, within this tree, and magically brought him back to life. So the second time, Set didn't do that whole kind of Cinderella slipper sarcophagus thing. He just cut his brother into 14 pieces and scattered them throughout the land of Egypt. And it's said now that Isis, with the help of Nephthys and Anubis and Thoth, Jehuti, the scribe, went searching for these pieces, and that everywhere one was found, they consecrated one of the sacred temples of Egypt that stands still today. There's 13 of them, because one piece was never found. Osiris's phallus was fed to the crocodiles of the Nile. And this was a huge problem, because resurrecting the king without that important piece to create a hair wasn't going to get the job done, for Isis and Osiris did not have a child. And it said that Thoth created this kind of magical golden phallus for Osiris, and that Isis flew as a bird above and became magically impregnated with their child, who would be born Horus, the avenger, Heru, the rising sun. And Osiris then went through the Duat, through the underworld. You know, which it said actually the sun does every time it sets in the west. I'm told that in the ancient tongue in Kemet, there was no word for death. They would just say westing. Because it was known that what rests in the west will eventually rise again, like the sun does in the east. It's a very beautiful thing, yeah. And so Osiris went through the underworld journey and eventually became the stars of the heavens that many of us now call Orion. And so, you know, the Orion mysteries, when you tune in kind of like the Greco-Roman transmission, not such a nice guy, not a nice guy. Hunter, bragging to Artemis, said that he could kill every living being on earth. And so Gaia created the scorpion to hunt him and all this, you know. So I like to connect when I engage with Orion in the heavens, with this figure of Osiris, with this principle of light and teachings and civilization and honor. And there's a lot of like good father energy there. And it's in such a sacred place of the sky, this place, it said, from which we come. Now, the brightest star, Sirius, which follows Orion through the heavens, is said to be Isis. And so forever there they are in the heavenly places, you know, mother and father of this virgin birth of the Son of God. So I know when I asked you that before, you were probably thinking about a cat with a different name. And we'll get back to him in a second. But I want to share this, right? So Orion, everyone knows Orion's belt. It's a very amazing thing. I will show you another time how like the weird folks of Washington, D.C. and their temple of a city built this strange phallic obelisk to reference this place. And it's aligned and to how in our day and age, Orion's belt stars rise like a pillar in the east in northern hemisphere skies. It's an amazing thing in the time in which we live. But beneath those three very bright stars, Orion's belt stars, is Orion's sword. Well, if Orion is Osiris, certainly this would be the golden phallus. And there's three stars there too. So they're, and it's almost kind of perpendicular to Orion's belt stars. They're not exactly. But there's three stars, and actually the middle one is not a star at all, but rather the Orion Nebula, which, you know, dare I say, has a very feminine vibe to it, a very kind of, you know, womb-ish vibe. And it is known to be a birthplace of stars, like a womb of stars. This is what nebula are. It's such a beautiful thing to behold. And there's deep mysteries in the Orion Nebula that seem to be painted in times and sacred works well before any telescope could have seen this thing to the resolution in which it is painted and honored. So whether that's channeled in or something left from ancient traditions, it's, you know, hard to say. But I do feel that this story is telling us that the sun was born in this place, in the golden phallus of Osiris, which would be Orion's sword. And so, you know, scavenger hunt this week, go engage with Orion, find Orion's belt stars, look just below, much more dim, but find the smoke of creation. And why do I say it that way? Because that's how the Maya described this sacred place of the sky. The Maya, it's still to this day, when newlyweds are married and they have now a new home, their tortilla grill will have three stones, which are known as the hearth stones. And these three stones are represented in they represent the stones of the heavens, the hearthstones of the heavens, which are one of Orion's belt stars, the easternmost belt star, and then Orion's 2 feet. Okay, so Regal, Saiph, and Alnitak. And these stars, it is said by the Maya, they surround the smoke of creation. So when the newlywed couple moves into their new home, the village fire is brought to their griddle, and in this wonderful ceremony, but those 3 stones on the griddle represent these 3 stars of the heavens that surround forever the smoke of creation. So it feels to me that we have a few sources here, right, in Egypt, a story that was actually only told from the Greek. And I think this is a very important thing, that when we try to get to the source material of the ancient wisdom, and this is true whether we're looking for the old astrology or whatever, like, the Druids are well known to have been quite literate, but none of the spiritual tradition was written. It was passed orally. It was like a mandate that it would never be written down. It was preserved. This is true in many indigenous cultures today for a very important reason. And so as we're kind of looking into the roots of Western astrology in Egypt, in Alexandria, which was this beautiful melting pot, right? Why? Because of conquerors, actually, right? But it's a very cosmopolitan center where all of these different wisdom traditions were coming in. Well, I think that they weren't getting at many of the source transmissions from that very land because it was very intentionally not written down, right? So that in the case of conquering or whatever, it would be preserved. And this is true still in many places. It's very much the story of our day. Okay, so the Maya, these 3 hearthstones surrounding the smoke of creation, Messier object number 42, Orion Nebula, okay, that is the golden phallus of Osiris, right, from which our own sun, Heru, Horus, was magically seated. And in the Lakota, this is part of the super kind of constellation or asterism known as the sacred hoop, where we're told our souls come from. And I imagine there are many other stories from many other lands that speak to this. Now, Orion is a very beautiful and kind of obvious constellation in the sky. You can imagine that many cultures would connect these dots in very similar ways because it's very prevalent and bright. In Hawaii, while there are certainly a deep tradition of seafaring and star navigation, from what I've heard about Orion, it's kind of like a modern creation because nobody, from what I have heard or not has yet been revealed, had like an ancient expression of like that giant constellation. It's often called like the child's cat's cradle, like that game that's played. The Orion can kind of look like that, right? So there's a wonderful thing to bring this back to sunrises and sunsets. It's said that Horus was born, the son was born to avenge his father's death. And that this vengeance takes place every time the sun rises. But then his uncle wins at night, every night when the sun sets, which we pronounce that way, for this was the name of the one who ushered his brother Osiris through the underworld into the heavens. So there's one more piece here. When I show Orion and Isis, there's Sirius kind of traveling together as Osiris and Isis. Maybe it would seem Horus is Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. No, it's not that sun, our sun. And there's this amazing piece, which might bring it back to the spiritual tradition into which you were initially raised, from what I understand, Amanda. In the 17th century, the constellations were Christianized, right? So kind of scrub the pagan off and like make them proper, right? And yet, I would say the mysteries were very much still written in the stars. So one thing that's very interesting is that what we call Orion, what was once known as Osiris, in this Christian constellation map created by Julius Schiller, was Saint Joseph, who carries the acacia sprig. And there's much more to the story. But of course, Saint Joseph representing Joseph, maybe not the father, right, but through some other form, the one who raised the Son of God. So what's not so clear, as it was in this tale that's handed down through the Greek from Egypt, was that there was no hiding that Horus was not only the son of this magical virgin birth, but the sun in our sky. That's not something that's often spoken of Jesus Christ. But here in Schiller's own transmissions, what he said is that in this monumental star atlas, the Coelum Stellatum Christianum replaces all the traditional names of the constellations with Christian ones. The names of constellations in the Northern Hemisphere are inspired by the New Testament and early history of the church. Aries is now St. Peter, for example. The Corona Borealis is Christ's crown of thorns. Cassiopeia is Mary Magdalene, which, if you know the story of Cassiopeia, actually, sadly, is not an honoring of Magdalene, which it would surprise us from this tradition if she was, right? That's a long story for another time and one I'd love to have, or a conversation I'd love to have. But we read also that the planets of the solar system have new names. Saturn is Adam, Jupiter is Moses, the sun is Jesus Christ. The Earth's moon, the Virgin Mary. Though, you know, there were 3 Marys at the crucifixion, and I would say one is the maiden, the waxing moon, right? One is the mother, the full moon, and one is the crone, the waning moon, right? And that very image of Mary, and therefore also of Magdalene, is moon, the companion of the sun. So there's this thing that Jesus said that astrologers love to share the night before his death, according to Mark, and this is Mark 14:12. And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And he setteth forth 2 of his disciples and saith unto them, go ye into the city, and there shall meet you a man bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him, right? So another one of the Gospels actually says it this way, follow him into the house in which he dwells. Well, the signs were once known as the terrestrial houses, and the water bearer certainly sounds like the one we call Aquarius. So many have looked at this as kind of a transmission from Jesus speaking to the coming age of Aquarius. But he doesn't say when. Unless you flip the page. It's when Christ is on trial, the whole gig was to get him to blaspheme publicly so they could justify his murder, right? And we read this, but Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. Many translations say power instead of mighty one there, but I like this translation because the mighty one is Orion. The clouds of heaven are the Milky Way, right? And the right hand of Orion literally points to the Milky Way, where in our day and age, and this is like a kind of 50-year window every 26,000 years, and we're in it. In our day and age, that right hand of the mighty one at the clouds of heaven hosts the 0 Cancer point, the north point of our zodiac. And that means in Northern Hemisphere places like in Jerusalem, that's where the summer solstice sun, the height of the light, is. And it was in 2001 and 19 years before then, and very importantly last year in 2020, when we had a solar eclipse, right? So moon and sun visibly becoming one, like Mary and Jesus, if you will, in the midst of this sacred hoop where we are told our souls come from, right? There on the right hand of the Mighty One, whose sword holds that nebula that I believe in the center of the hearthstones, the smoke of creation, that I believe literally is the place where our sun was born. And then of course our planets are born of that. And as I said earlier, this very much defies like modern astronomical thought. So please don't say this is some kind of astronomical truth, or you'll find this on an astronomy website. For me, this is ancient astronomy, and the way that the stories of old, especially when we heard them spoken in different ways from different cultures around the world, including Christian, interestingly, like mystical Christian, the way that I hear it, are telling us about our home zone, and the Pleiades live there. And there's a chance that I think maybe all of these places, which are in the Orion arm of the Milky Way, which is where we are said also as our sun and our system dwell, that we're all kind of like sister stars that emerge from the kind of spiraled out of the same place. And, one of these assumptions, like what I talked about before, that would say there's no way this is true, is based upon that we are of the Milky Way and we're well out of time. But I will say that there was some decent, like kind of accepted telescope guy astronomer work at the University of Boston. And gosh, I want to say Virginia, but that's wrong. But I can't remember. It was some years ago where they basically, looking only at super red giant stars, which are like said to be older than the Milky Way, they were able to see for the first time just why maybe the galactic cross, this cross where the sun is in this image, if you're watching the video version, where this whole idea that the galaxy and the solar system planes are not coincident. It's a strange thing that we're in this kind of spiral galaxy, as it said, but we're not like in the disk of the spiral. We're like going up and above it as according to the modern cosmology, like as our sun and our whole system orbits the galactic center in like 242 million years. But what this research of this study seemed to suggest was because they saw that these super red giants were at this same kind of like angular divergence that we see between the galactic plane and the ecliptic or the solar system plane, that it seemed to suggest that perhaps we don't come from the Milky Way, but rather that we come from what they used to think was the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, and then now understand is actually the Sagittarius galaxy, and as galaxies do, seems to be merging with the Milky Way. And so that what the Milky Way actually is like our new home. It's like two galaxies, they mate, they become one, right? So that I know is like a lot of kind of science and kind of heavy vocabulary or whatever. But I will just say that the very things from what I can understand, and I maybe don't know enough, that astronomers would use to disprove this idea that perhaps we come from the Orion Nebula. One, they like different kinds of stars in our sun seem to be born there, at least now, but this would have been a long time ago. And also just based upon how far it is and where they've known has always been our home. But there's a chance that that's not quite true, and that our sun's on a little bit more of a journey than it is kind of currently understand to be the truth. And I hear that kind of whispered in these ancient transmissions, but I might just be liberally hearing what I want to hear to tell a cool story. By the way, if folks want to see like a longer version of that transmission and why in our day and age this kind of sun on the cross prophecy really seems to be coming true, go to geminibrett.com and go to the offerings page, and you'll find a movie there called The Sun on the Cross and the Turning of the Ages. And take this Astrology Hub Sacred Astronomy course, and you on the other side of it will have the vocabulary. First of all, you'll have very intimate experiences with the sky, which are much more than just learning words and repeating equations and stuff. That's not the kind of astronomy I teach, but you will have a vocabulary that, just as it is, as you're learning astrology, will allow you to speak this language in a way that right now might seem unattainable. It's not.
Okay, so we have the birth of the sun, our sun, which is coming from the smoke of creation, which is under Orion's belt, which is basically the golden phallus of Osiris, which is Osiris and Isis who came together to have Horus, which again is the birth of our sun. And you're saying that that's where we come from because we wouldn't be able to be here on Earth without the sun. So the Earth follows the sun.
Amazing, Amanda. Perfect. I'm so glad that you can follow that madness.
I mean, those were the notes that I took down. I was like, I think that's the major bullet points if we were going to break it down.
Exactly what I'm saying. And then fascinatingly, when the constellations very recently were Christianized, they seem to
they're corroborating that evidence.
Totally. Yes. And also speak, I think, very importantly to the power of our time. Now,
Right.
again, don't go to the astronomy books to confirm this one. It ain't happening.
Right.
They'll certainly deny it for you if that's what you're looking for. So enjoy yourself if it is. But again, your scavenger hunt for the week. Get out and just drink some of that Orion. I mean, in the Pleiades and Sirius. It is the time of the year right now to just engage with those beings in the southwest after sunset, and they're up all night, and it's just so powerful. And if you get some binoculars or like a good zoom lens on a camera or look through a telescope, the Orion Nebula really comes alive. I also encourage you to spend some time looking at some of the Hubble pictures of the Orion Nebula. There's something to it. And just as we were saying before, well, maybe the elders aren't going to tell us, or maybe not even be able to tell us like why there's so many tribes that are saying that we actually come from the Pleiades, but ask the Pleiades. And maybe you'll hear a song in your head that confirms or tells you all you need to know. And the same thing with Orion's sword and the Orion Nebula. Just let's, journeying into that place and tell me what you find. So please use the comment sections of these videos to let us know how this thing landed for you. And let me know where we come from on any level that question sparks in you. I'm always interested to hear from my fellow mystics and seekers, just where it is that we come from and where we're going.
Brett, this is going to be one of those, I should know this sort of questions, and I'm just going to say it. I've looked for the Pleiades with my little app thing. Nothing says the Pleiades.
Oh, so there's, some of
What
the
am I
apps
looking
will
for?
actually, but you could type in, so you're like able to kind of search for stars and it will point to them.
No, but I mean, I know like theoretically where they should be. So I'm looking for it. But
Yeah,
then,
so you can, I mean, you actually probably can do a search and maybe type it in. I always spell the Pleiades wrong. You could search for the star Maya, which is Maia, or Electra is another one of the Pleiades stars,
okay.
or Alcyone, Alcyone. But
Oh,
let
I've
me
got
show
that
you
one.
just
Yeah.
here, right? So this is California in this moment, looks a lot more like that, but I'm going to go to sunset. And maybe an hour later, here's like, 8:30 p.m. And Mars actually, so amazingly, right now is very close to the Pleiades.
Ah,
So
okay.
if you find Orion is said to be hunting the bull. And so a star that you'll go to, some say that this is Hokaula in Hawaii, red star, right? Some say that title actually belongs to Capella up here. But Orion's hunting the bull. So he's like facing the bull. And you'll see that what's called the Hyades, which is this beautiful V shape in the bull's face. And then on the back of the bull sit the Pleiades. And once you connect, they're just so undeniable. And then a fun thing right now too, Mars, who's so high in the Hawaiian skies, like literally overhead.
Yes. Right overhead.
As we go through the days, like here's February 18th, 19th, 20, 20, the Pleiades in our day and age mark the border between tropical Taurus and Gemini. So as Mars is ingressing Gemini on our charts, or at 29 Taurus on our charts, Mars will show you where the Pleiades live. And here in Stellarium, let's see if I can, that looks like it's kind of 3-3. Mars, so, I told you I was going to talk about the Trinity. I guess that's the right place to end. So as you're watching Mars now, just dig every night as Mars is day after day, night after day, getting closer and closer. And then it will be around March 3rd, where he's as closely aligned to the Pleiades as he can be. So, when I'm out with people under dark skies, I love bringing out like the laser pointer. I try not to shoot it at like Mars. It seems like a bad idea. But, it's cool when the planets themselves will be the laser pointer.
Yes.
So like every time the moon ingresses from Taurus to Gemini, she'll show you where the Pleiades are. And Mars does this about every 2 years, and now's the time. So
Nice. Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much, Brett. This is so illuminating, so much food for thought, so many adventures that we can have with the sky. I know I've been mesmerized by Sirius. I even texted Brett one night. I was like, let's talk about Sirius because I really want to know more. I really want to know more. So we will on an upcoming show of storytelling for sure. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Brett, for sharing your wisdom, your storytelling, your interpretation of the mythology and how it comes together across these different cultures. It is very unique and precious. And I want to thank you for holding that for us and then encouraging us to tune into our own stories and our own the way that we're interpreting the stories as well, and then share that with each other, because
Mhm.
that's how we create this collective body of knowledge and information, and we can help take each other to different levels. And like you said, the Hawaiians also did not write down their traditions. It was passed through in the chanting, it was passed through in the stories, it was passed through in the hula. And so there's a lot of this that we need to tune into energetically. You know, there's like a frequency, I think, that we can, where we can find this knowledge and this information. And like you said, this is creating it in our modern times. So it's really such a pleasure to share this space with you, to share this space with all of you out there. I'm going to be ordering my telescope today, which is
Yay,
so
nice.
exciting. Oh my gosh, 2 weeks. It should be here in 2 weeks. And then who knows how long it's going to take me to figure out how to set it up. But it is coming. That's going to be really fun. And I'll share everything that I can with all of you. Brett, thank you for being here. For those of you who want to be on the wait list for our Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers class that is going to be coming up with Gemini Brett here very soon, you can go to astrologyhub.com/sacred astronomy and you will be put on the wait list, and we'll be sharing lots of nice things with you before the course starts. All right. Thank you. All
See you in
right.
space, friends.
See you in space.